Hi everybody, this is Craig Teener for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Benjamin, who's a beginning photographer from Denmark. Benjamin says he's just been shooting for a few months and he was house sitting for Pearl the cat, went out into the garden and took a few pictures and really liked this one. He says he loves old classic black and white photography. He did a black and white conversion in Camera Raw. Benjamin shot this with a Nikon D90 using an 50mm f1.8 prime lens at ISO 400, exposed the file for 1/4000th of a second, shooting wide open at f1.8. And Benjamin says, just love to hear any comments about the composition and any comments about technique that might help him. And I'm quoting here, on this exciting journey, and I totally agree with you right there, Benjamin, about this being an exciting journey. And big thank you to Benjamin for sharing this image. It's just amazing. I grew up with a cat, and in my advertising career, shooting lifestyle stuff and also for stock photography, and then for teaching purposes, I've tried to photograph cats quite a few times. And unlike dogs, cats are very independent and can be really hard to photograph at all. So to get a shot like this, where you're shooting in a way that's technically difficult, very shallow depth of field, getting the sharpness in just the right place here, and getting this incredible gesture. When I first looked at this image, I almost felt like I was looking at a bobcat or even a cougar that's hunting. Just an incredible gesture that tells the story of Pearl hunting here. And the other thing that I loved right away about this image is just how unified it is, from a framing standpoint. Going back to shooting at f1.8 here, not only has Benjamin done an incredible job of getting the eyes of Pearl and the whiskers, this part of the face, the mask of the face, sharp, and the way shallow depth of field here with everything else being soft is really simplifying the image. But it's not just that, it's also how the out of focus circles of light, the bokeh, the 51.8 here at f1.8, are creating this really beautiful pattern that creates a beautiful space, negative space above Pearl. And there's a really beautiful rhythm with all these circles, and really what's the main subject in the image. All this energy ends up here with the eyes, sort of making us imagine whatever Pearl is stalking here in the image. And the framing is really beautiful at the bottom of the image. You've got this really beautiful rhyme with the grasses that rhymes the space shape and gesture of the lower part of Pearl's body and the legs here attaching to the ground. The other thing that's really interesting about this image, and boy does it make me think about the editing process, is I looked at this image, and there was one thing that I wanted to change pretty soon after I started looking at it. I started thinking, boy, I wish that this light was more over here in the face. And then I thought about a couple of other things I'd like to change, and I did all the Photoshop work. And then when I got finished with everything and I went back and looked at the original, I thought, well, wait a minute. Actually, the lighting is backwards here, but it actually goes along with what's happening in the shot. And this is what I mean. The whole concept of you're sort of misdirected in a lot of respects to look here, and that Pearl is basically in the shadow. And you think about a cat sort of stalking you, coming out of the shadows and surprising you. And when I did my version and then came back and looked at this, it really hit home of how beautiful that lighting pattern is in the context of this story. The other thing that I thought about wanting to do almost right away is to flip the image from left to right. I'm going to talk about more. Well, let's just go ahead and talk about that right now. When I looked at this image, I thought, okay, I know that the left-hand side of the frame inherently has more weight because we want to start there in the west. And with all of this energy coming here, and then Benjamin sort of breaking quote-unquote a rule here and having less negative space in front of the implied energy than behind, I really started to feel like I was getting dumped out on the left-hand side of the image. And I felt like if I flipped things, this part would be over here, and it would really help to balance the image left to right in a way that would be more meaningful. And so I did do that work as part of the work that I'm going to show you for a variation on this image. But in the same respects that the lighting is a little bit backwards here, the fact that this image does sort of tip in this direction, where you start here and then you're misdirected, and then it really leans in this direction, again sort of goes along with the story of being misdirected or being stalked and being surprised. And there sort of being this tipping point where all of a sudden this thing happens and it does tip in a direction that's really powerful. So, I mean, ultimately, looking at this image sort of teaches me something I've been taught over and over and over again. And it's not just photography, it's all kinds of things, music. The editing process, it's a lot of times not very good when it's rushed. And playing around with an image and letting it sit, and in this case I really sort of changed my mind about it. I am going to go ahead and show you this other radically different version, which is really more of an idealized portrait, and hopefully there's some meaning in it, because we are going to talk about some design things and there'll be maybe some Photoshop ideas that you can get out of that. But to me, after I spent time with this, it just is perfect, just the way that it is. Let's look at a variation. Let's look at a variation where we do flip this. And let's think about the variation like this, that we're going more for sort of a formal portrait in this mode. If we come and we flip this, for me, if I'm just thinking about this being more idealized, I do actually like the way that I move with it flipped, and I do feel a little bit more balance from left to right. Would love to hear your feedback about that. Let's just flip it one more time. That's this way, and then flipping it this way. For me, that left-hand side does start to pull back more. I don't feel like Pearl is nearly as close to the edge in this version, and I feel like I stay with Pearl a little bit longer in this scenario. I talked about the lighting being backwards. If this is more of a portrait, get the light off of this part and add more light to the face. And so I'm just going to show you how I would go about doing that. Obviously, there are a ton of ways to do it. I'd first come in and I would use curves to flatten this out. I'm basically going to try to create a blank canvas where the value in here is the same as some of the values on the face, so that this doesn't pop out as much. And I'm going to do that by coming in and flattening out on the curve in this area, and then applying that change locally, staying off of the areas that are already dark. So here's one layer where I started to do that work, and remember, this is just a starting point. I know that's hideously flat. Essentially what I'm trying to do in that area is just make it look like that part of Pearl's coat is actually darker. I know the light is still hitting there, and I'm going to need to bring back some local contrast. But I just want to make it look like Pearl is darker there and reflecting less light. This is what the curve looks like. You can see where those pixels are. I came in and I flattened out, and then this is what the mask looks like. So you can see that I had applied that change locally, staying off of the places that were already dark to just flatten out. And I came in and I worked on that a little bit more with another curves layer, same kind of idea, to just flatten that area out. Then I came in and I painted the pattern that you see here, and that is suggested here and here and here and here, and coming down into here and here and here. I came in and I painted that pattern in to keep this movement going, again thinking more about sort of an idealized portrait and the idea of unity and rhythm. And I also, on this layer, did some darkening around here, and so there's the change that I made. Pretty radical change, bringing some local contrast back there, and this is what the mask looked like. So you can see that I came in and got a real small brush and did some very specific work on that mask. Then I came in and I popped the face even a little bit more. Came in and did some darkening all the way around to bring Pearl forward a little bit more. And then I thought, you know what? I'd like to lighten Pearl up some relative to the background, and relative in particular to this area and here, and then to darken a little bit like this. So you're going to see me open Pearl up, keep it dark around her, and that's what that change looks like. And now I'm going to do two things that are pretty radical to just keep pushing this towards sort of an idealized portrait in this hunting mode. One of the things that's happening right now to my eye is that this bright area of bokeh, this area, this looks maybe like a leaf, another leaf. These things are pretty high contrast to the extent that they break up a real simple pattern. Down here the grass is very simple, and then these ideas are very different, so they become very high contrast, and these ideas are just brighter than all the other circles of bokeh back here. And it's not only that, they're all on a line. Remember, we've talked about how the implied visual pathway between subjects a lot of times is even more dynamic and more visually powerful than contouring lines, and this breaks the visual sort of implied movement. There's the change to get rid of those things, and I think that we could stop right here, if we were talking about sort of an idealized portrait, and compare this to where we started, and then this is ending up here. And then I took it even further. I came in and grabbed this information, stretched it out a little bit, and made a patch to move this negative space along like this in the background, and there's that change. And I really don't like that anymore. Anyway, I hope this more idealized version gave you some ideas and was some fun to look at. Ultimately, I know this is going to seem like, well, why did we take this journey? Because it was fun, because of what Benjamin said. It's all exciting. Ultimately, in the editing process, is sort of like when I listened to Achtung Baby, I Love You Too, and I listened to that album for the first time, and I thought, what is this? And it's now my favorite record of theirs of all time. The editing process is tricky, and boy, things need time to sort of settle in on us. And I think the editing process is also never-ending, and you can really see that in a lot of classic photographs that have been printed in the careers of photographers over many, many, many years. Awesome shot from Benjamin. Huge thank you to him for sharing this shot with us, and huge thank you to all of you for being here and supporting the Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique.